As she passes the plebeians on the cobblestone streets of Rome, they whisper amongst themselves. Their judgmental eyes act as stones in which to pelt her as they repeat the rumors of all the men who have fallen trapped in her poisonous web, devoured by her bloodlust. Engrossed in their curiosity, they speculate that all the men she has promised to will meet their untimely demise, as they are not the forbidden love in which she seeks. Her brother, the cardinal, and father, the pope, the only love she is cursed to indulge. Just when you thought your family was dysfunctional. Hello all you ghouls and goblins, welcome back to Coffin Up Turts. Tonight we're diving headfirst into the Italian Renaissance. I can just smell the passing draft of raw sewage floating down the cobblestone now. What I love most about the Renaissance was that nothing stood in the way of making high art. Not even bathing could stop Michelangelo from creating his masterpieces. It was a remarkable time to be alive. Unfortunately, it was also a remarkable time to get murdered. And what defines a moment in history more than a heinous murder or sex scandal? Absolutely nothing, which brings us to the infamous Lucrezia Borgia. Meet the Borgias, Italy's most fame-hungry family, albeit they got nothing on the American royalty we have right here at home. When Lucrezia was only 9 or 10 years old, she was already a proper lady. By all historical accounts, she was incredibly pleasant, bright, curious. Her intelligence was truly remarkable for such a young girl. Her brothers, on the other hand, little shits. Well, except for Joffrey. He tried his darndest. Now, most people like to imagine that being born into Europe's most powerful families is every young girl's dream.
Bellonci!
For daughters of noble houses back then, childhood was little more than a cold waiting room before political trafficking began. You see, when you were wealthy and well-dressed in the Renaissance, nobody asked if you were happy. They just asked who you were marrying. Now they just ask who's your surgeon. For Lucrezia, the politics started early. At only 13 years old, she was betrothed to her first husband, Giovanni Sforza. A real a-hole, if you ask me. But before we dig into Lucrezia, first, let's unearth the Borgias. They weren't old money or high aristocracy. They weren't anything at all, really. You could say they were like the upper middle class. Spanish landowners with education climbing their way up the ranks of the Catholic Church. In Renaissance Europe, the church could be every bit as powerful as a throne. For the Borgias, I suppose, it was the obvious choice. It all began when Alfonso de Borja became Pope Calixtus, I think, the Third in 1455. And like most men with a hint of power, he pulled as many strings as he could for his family and friends. His nephew, Rodrigo, took full advantage of this new familial status. For decades, he used the church to accumulate wealth and allies, with accusations trailing behind him the entire way. Bribery, corruption, nepotism, you name it. Rodrigo had been elected Pope Alexander VI in 1492, and unlike his predecessors, who at least pretended to take the job seriously, he never bothered hiding that his family was benefiting greatly. For all intents and purposes, the Vatican became Borgia headquarters. Now, the family tree is extensive and complicated, and quite frankly, not much use to this story. Tonight, only 3 people are worth exhuming: Lucrezia, her father, Rodrigo, the Pope, and her brother Cesare. Lucrezia was born in 1480 in Subiaco, Italy, into a family of high nobility. Girls like Lucrezia had all the finer things in life: the best clothes, education, books, music, every comfort money could buy. But the innocence of childhood was a luxury rarely afforded to girls like her. Poor thing. Noble girls at the time were human bargaining chips used to create alliances with other noble families. So when Lucrezia was just about 13 years old, her father married her off to the 26-year-old Giovanni Sforza, Lord of Pesaro and a member of Milan's powerful Sforza family. And I think we can all understand why strategic marriages rarely end in a happily ever after. Lucrezia and Giovanni's marriage only lasted a few short years. The official reason why the marriage was annulled was that it had never been consummated. Nothing screams the Catholic Church more than an investigation into the sex life of a teenager. Despite everyone knowing it was actually because Giovanni had outlived his usefulness to the Borgias, he took those impotent allegations to heart, as one does, and in an effort to save face, he did what any mature man would do after being humiliated by his child bride. He started a nasty rumor. He told everyone within earshot that Lucrezia had been intimate with her father and her brother. Classy guy. Isn't it remarkable what a bruised ego can come up with? All jokes aside, one man's fragile masculinity created one of the most egregious rumors in European history. Unfortunately for Lucrezia, she wouldn't be shaking those allegations even centuries past her death. All families have their fair share of skeletons in the closet. The Borgias just preferred to leave theirs floating in the Tiber River. Caesar was what the manosphere would have you believe an alpha is. You know the types, never taking no for an answer, pissing on everything in sight. The trouble with men like Caesar is that they don't handle rejection very well. Personally, I've always steered clear of men like this. They're excruciatingly exhausting. Unfortunately for Caesar, the life he wanted was not the life that Daddy had planned out for him. Unlike Lucrezia, who had been raised to smile and be a good little bargaining chip, her brother Caesar wanted actual power. He wanted enemies and territories to rule over, but instead he got pushed into a cardinal position in the church. Meanwhile, his brother, Giovanni, the favored child, was made the second Duke of Gandia and the commander of the papal troops. Then, in 1497, Giovanni was found stabbed to death in the Tiber River. At first, most people assumed it was a robbery that had gone wrong, but it didn't take long for the death to be ruled a murder. Rodrigo, otherwise known as the Pope Alexander VI, in case you forgot, mourned his son's death very publicly. He was so devastated that he actually announced at the Vatican that he was going to change his ways and reform the entire church. Okay then. I guess that means no more orgies for the Pope? I wish I was joking. Take a moment and look up Banquet of Chestnuts. Oh wait. It was an all-night orgy held in the Papal Palace, featuring 50 naked courtesans crawling on the floor, picking up chestnuts with their between-me-down-theres. And yes, the Holy Father himself was reportedly in attendance, enjoying every minute of it. Needless to say, it didn't take long for the public to do the math on who actually killed the Pope's golden boy Giovanni. Caesar wasn't exactly quiet about his ambitions after all. But with his brother out of the way, Caesar could finally free himself from the church's pink fuzzy shackles and take over the family's armies and rule Italy in absolute terror. And while the rest of Rome was too scared of Caesar to speak up, Giovanni's widow was one of the first to openly accuse him. Around the same time, another rumor started floating around the palace, specifically that Lucrezia had taken a liking to a courtier named Perota. And, not so surprisingly, his body would also turn up in the Tiber River. I don't know about you guys, but something is starting to smell a little fishy near the Tiber River. And it's not the sturgeon. I almost forgot the best part. In 1498, a child was born in Rome, and our lovely Pope, the Holy Father himself, officially claimed this newborn baby as his own son. But this stirred up quite a few questions because, in a second document, the child was claimed to be fathered by Caesar instead. Someone made a big whoopsie at the Vatican Chancellery. Enter husband number 2, Alfonso of Aragon. By every single account, he was young and handsome, a true gentleman by every sense of the word. They had a son together, and for a brief miracle of a moment, Lucrezia had something that vaguely resembled a happy life. Naturally, it didn't survive the family politics, because the second her father Rodrigo, the Pope, and Caesar decided they needed an alliance with France more than they needed Naples, poor Alfonso was getting the job. He was attacked in the streets right near St. Peter's Basilica, stabbed multiple times, and left for dead. But against all odds, he survived. Lucrezia practically locked herself in his sick room, nursing him for weeks while he clung to life. Then, a couple of Caesar's loyal followers snuck into his recovery room the moment Lucrezia was away. And, well, he didn't survive that visit. Eventually, in 1502, she ran off to Ferrara, where she married her third husband, Alfonso d'Este. But her and her family's reputation of murder and incest arrived weeks before she did, because everyone was invested in the prince's new political liability. Wife. However, it didn't take long for Lucrezia to win over the court of public opinion. According to letters from people who actually met her, she was nothing like what they had heard. She was actually very generous, a patron of the arts, and was highly efficient when running the court whenever her husband was away. We all know how these things go. Stains don't come out easily. And for Lucrezia, the malicious fan fiction followed her anyways. She died in 1519 at only 39 years old, shortly after giving birth to her 10th child. But that didn't stop the naysayers, because 300 years after she had already died, Victorian-era writers dubbed her the Queen of Poison. They were claiming that she was a killing machine, and a pillbox-style ring with a hinged lid holding a lethal poison called cantarella was her weapon of choice. Cantarella was a colorless, tasteless, and odorless chemical that would cause a slow and painful death. They would say that a single touch of her hand to the rim of your glass meant you would not be seeing the morning. People would also gossip about hidden passageways, vanishing servants, and family banquets where they would pick off the guests of their choosing to be their next victims. Huge if true. So, let's roll out the receipts, shall we? The incest accusation started from a bitter ex-husband, claiming that the child he was arranged to marry was involved in a sexual relationship with her father and brother, who happened to be the Pope and the Cardinal. Oh, and he also did this via pamphlet, just to make the whole thing even more pathetic. And of course, there isn't a single shred of evidence for those claims to be true either, so I guess we can finally put those to rest. Luckily, we have historians like Sarah Bradford to set the record straight, disproving these myths. what some people will do to sell a story, I tell ya. And not to be that girl, but every accusation against Lucrezia did come from a man who wanted something from her. Even after death, Victor Hugo basically ran an 1830s tabloid smear campaign against a dead woman to fill theater seats. Just saying. Well, that's all I got, folks. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on a story, and comment below what hellish history, fucked up folklore, or mysterious monster you want me to drag into the light next. Until then, sweet screams.